There's a place He comes to me. Though I'm blind, He helps me see. Though I see dimly in this place, one day I'll see Him face to face.
This is Kurt Kaikkonen, pastor of Calvary Chapel, Waterford, at your neighborhood church. Today on Face to Face, we'll be in the book of Genesis. So grab your Bibles and let's get started. If you want to hear this complete message in its entirety, go to yourneighborhoodchurch.com, where you can download Your Neighborhood Church app at the App Store. Now in chapter 37, we don't focus so much on Jacob, but we begin to focus on Jacob's grown children. And the youngest of these is Joseph, and he's 17 years old here. And this family, they've always had a problem with picking favorites. And then they let everybody know that they have a favorite. If you remember Isaac, he had a favorite son, and Rebekah, she had a favorite son, and Jacob, he had a favorite wife. And now we have Jacob's favorite son from his favorite wife. And having favorites has never helped these people, because it always ends up putting the other people against the favorite. And that's what happens here. Joseph, he's the youngest, and he's Jacob's favorite. And being the youngest, it doesn't really help him when he goes around and snitches on his older brothers. And that's what he did. And all 10 of these older brothers, they already have a problem with Joseph because they know that dad likes him best. But it was really easy for Jacob to like Joseph best because Joseph was the only one that was good. The rest of them, at their very best, were jerks. And at their very worst, they were immoral, hardened, murdering thieves. None of them were good at all. And Joseph, we'll find out even later, that he was also very good looking because he probably looked like his mom, like the beautiful Rachel. And it says that his dad, Jacob, that he gave Joseph a coat of many colors. And nobody really knows what the translation of those words, many colors, really means, because it's only used in one other place in the Bible, and that was talking about the king's daughters. They're only guessing what made Joseph's coat any different from the other boys' coats. So, I mean, you might think that the other boys are going around with these really plain, drab, dirty, tarnished kind of robes. And then Joseph, he's kind of walking around like he's Jimi Hendrix, and he has these really brightly tie-dyed robes, and he's all cool. But that's probably not what it really means. What the difference in Joseph's robe was probably is that it had sleeves, that it was probably a coat with sleeves. And what having sleeves means is that this coat was not made for working, because his robe would have extended all the way down to his wrists. And then it would also have gone all the way down, all the way past his ankles. And these other boys, well, what they would have had, they would have had these shorter robes that were made for working. And it's really possible that this shows Jacob's intent on picking Joseph to be the head of the clan, that he was going to be the leader and he was going to give him that right of being the firstborn, because Reuben lost his right to be the firstborn because of that encounter with Bilhah. And the next in line would have been Simeon, and then the next after that was Levi, but they lost a right because of their deceit and their murders. And so it's real possible that Jacob's going to pick the firstborn of his favorite wife, Rachel. And this envy and this jealousy, it gripped them so badly that they couldn't even speak to Joseph anymore. They couldn't be civil. And you would have thought that these boys would have been able to have some kind of compassion for him, because he's the only one of the 12 who lost their mother. who knew their mother, because even little Benjamin, he's only known Leah as his mother. So Joseph here, he suffered the greatest loss of all these boys, and he's dad's favorite because it probably feels like it keeps him connected to Rachel. So now Joseph, he has this dream, and this dream is from God, and Joseph shares it with him because who else does he have to share it with? These guys are his brothers, and they're all he has to talk to. I mean, he could probably go talk to the sheep, but they probably won't tell him much. And it's possible that he may have thought that they might have some kind of insight into these dreams and that they might be able to understand it and maybe able to confirm it. And maybe they could even be happy for him. But that's not what happens. They couldn't hear God in this dream at all, even though this was a prophetic dream. And they treat this dream as if it's Joseph trying to have some kind of power grab, that Joseph is now going to claim leadership, and so they hate him even more. But God, he confirmed Joseph's dream, and the way he confirmed it to him is that he gave him another dream. And this one, it didn't go very well either. And you see that Jacob didn't say anything about the first dream, but Jacob didn't like hearing Joseph's dream that put Joseph over him, his father, and his mother. And when it says his mother, they're talking about Leah there. And the funny thing about all this is that they all interpreted this dream correctly. They all knew its interpretation. None of them put this dream off to Joseph just having a little bit too much pizza before bedtime, because somehow they all knew that this dream was from God. And it says that Jacob kept these things in his mind because if you remember, God used to speak to Jacob in his dreams. And so this interpretation of the 11 stars and the sun and the moon, well, that gives us a key to a very important passage that we read later in the book of Revelation in chapter 12, verse 1, because that's the same description we find there, because this means Israel, but we know that means Israel here. Well, that means it's the 12 tribes of Israel when we read it again in Revelation. And in that passage, it talks about Israel giving birth to the Christ. All right, so now Jacob, he sends Joseph to go check on the other brothers who are out with the sheep. And he sends Joseph down to Shechem. And you have to wonder, well, what are these guys doing back there in Shechem? Because that's where they murdered all those men from that whole city. And that's where they buried all the idols. But I guess they must have had really good pasture down there. And it must have been really hard to resist. And they all knew that area real well because they lived there for around 10 years. And Shechem, it's about 50 miles from Hebron where they are. And it would have taken Joseph 3 days to get down there. And so he travels down there for 3 days and he can't find them anywhere. But somehow, by coincidence, a man shows up and he just happens to hear where his brothers went. And his brothers went to Dothan. I don't think this was a coincidence. I believe all this is being orchestrated by God because all this is part of God's plan. And Dothan, well, it's 13 miles north of Shechem. And it'll take Joseph another day to get up there. And you have to realize Joseph never caused any of the problems in their home. Joseph, he only reveals the problems in this home that were already there. And as Joseph approaches, his brothers see him far off because they recognize that robe. And so they know it's Joseph. And so they start making their plans way before Joseph ever arrived because they hate him. They've wanted to kill Joseph for a long time. They just didn't have an opportunity, but now they do. And it's kind of hard for us to imagine hating and plotting to kill somebody innocent, and especially a family member, because it doesn't make sense. Because evil, it never makes sense. And this is where Joseph's life begins to parallel the life of Jesus. because Joseph, he was hated here without a cause. And that's just like Jesus. Jesus was hated without a cause. And their plotting to kill Joseph is no different than the Jewish leaders plotting to kill Jesus. And these dreams that Joseph had spoken to these boys, well, they're starting to get to them. And I think the reason is because they know Joseph's character, and they probably know that these dreams are from God. So now they're going to kill the little snitch, the little dreamer, and they're going to see what happens to his dreams now. And the way that they're talking, it sounds like they're trying to defeat God's will and that they're actually going to be fighting against God. But Reuben, who's the oldest, he was the only one who didn't want to kill Joseph. He wanted to rescue him. But Reuben, he was a very weak leader, and he'd already lost his authority with his brothers. But Reuben did manage to convince these brothers to throw Joseph into the pit before they killed him, because they wanted to kill Joseph first and then throw him into the pit. And so they attacked Joseph, and they wrestled him down, and they beat him, and they stripped off his clothes, and then they pushed him, and they pushed him hard so that he'd fall into that deep pit. And that pit, he wouldn't be able to crawl out of, because that pit was a cistern. And what a cistern is a water holding tank. And this one was empty, but it would be very deep, and it would have a very long, narrow opening. And the only way out of it is to be able to be pulled out by a rope. And you see, there's a part of things when you plot and you scheme, and there's a part where you've gone way too far, and you really can't go backwards from there, and you can't get out of it, because if they released him at this point, they would have been in such trouble with Jacob, their father. And so they're determined they have to kill him, but that's also what they wanted to do. But before they kill him, and before they do their deed, these cold-hearted killers, they sit down to have lunch, and they're going to discuss how they're going to kill him. And they're talking about, well, who's going to get to kill him, and how will we kill him, and how will we cover our tracks? And I believe they enjoyed this conversation because of the envy and the jealousy that has grown so much and so deep against their brother. They couldn't stand him anymore. They hated him. And do you want to know why? It's because Joseph, he was good. Because Joseph, he was godly, and he was kind, and he was good looking, and he was loved by his father. And it's because Joseph was wonderful, and Joseph, he was everything that they weren't. Christians are often hated and mistreated because they're kind and because they're loving, but their persecutors will always give different reasons. What it is, it's because of their light. Because their light, it shows the other's darkness, and it exposes them, and they can't stand that. And so these wicked young men, they're all between the ages of their 20s to their mid-30s.
You've been listening to Face to Face. Face to Face on this radio station has been provided by Your Neighborhood Church. If you want to help support Face to Face and put this program on other stations just like yours, you can contact us at yourneighborhoodchurch.com or write Your Neighborhood Church, P.O. Box 500, Romeo, Michigan 48065.
There's a place he comes to me. Though I'm blind, he helps me see. Though I see dimly in this place, one day I'll see him face to face.
Tune in again tomorrow at this same time as we continue to go through the Bible.